Hello, my name is Dr. Carl Candlepun, and this is the third official episode of my new Lost podcast. Today's episode will feature no spoilers beyond Season 1, Episode 3, Tabula Rasa. In last week's episode, I introduced several first-time viewers of Lost, each of whom attended my screening of the pilot, to you, my podcast audience. This week was the first time I was able to host an actual post-episode discussion with this group of people. However, due to the length of this discussion, it did not feel appropriate to force it into this podcast episode. Instead, I will be releasing that separately within the next 2 days. When that is released, I would recommend that you watch the video version, simply because there are half a dozen people speaking in it, and that may be difficult to track if you are listening to the audio-only version. But for now, without further ado, let's begin. Welcome to Dr. Candlepun's Lost Podcast. I'm Christopher Huth, otherwise known as Dr. Candlepun, and with me is...
Michael Huth, also known as Anesthesiologist Flickerson.
So today we're talking about Season 1, Episode 3, Tabula Rasa. I guess before I ask what you thought of the episode, I'll pick up something that I asked you last week about, do you know what Tabula Rasa means? Have you looked it up since? Not that I expected you to, but...
Actually, I did not look it up. I did see what it is, and I have since forgotten.
How did you see what it was?
I was looking at some online commentary and...
About Lost?
Yes, specifically about after I had watched the episode, and there was just a little blip in there that said the definition of it.
Well,
since I don't remember the definition of it, you don't have to worry about what I also don't remember from what I looked up.
Well, I just want to, like the idea of what we're doing here, like I'm not sure why you were looking up something about the episode, but like that makes me nervous. Like I don't want you like.
No, trust me, the secret's safe with me. I don't remember I don't remember what the context of why I looked something up, but It wasn't searching the name for that, but that's all I got.
Well, that's what I don't care if you were looking up the definition. I'm worried that you were looking like, oh, what's going on here, and then they fucking spoil stuff.
No, that definitely wasn't it.
Okay.
Scratch all that.
Okay, so anyways, Tabula Rasa means clean slate in Latin, and it's a philosophical concept that has been around for forever, but it was popularized by the philosopher John Locke, who one of the characters is named after, bald guy. Basically, the philosophical concept of Tabula Rasa means like the idea that we're each born with completely free minds, no personality has developed, and we're kind of free to determine who we become as we grow up. Kind of, in my opinion, ignores like genetic influences on, brain physiology and neurology. I also feel like, based on my vague understanding of the concept, that it kind of takes for granted the influences of what your experiences are, just because of the way it talks about how you're free to choose your soul and stuff like that. Anyways, the point is, clean slate is basically what it means, and it's very relevant to this episode. So with that said, you just go ahead. Anything you want to talk about? Any thoughts you had?
So I think I want to start with the Marshal, and I allowed myself to wonder at first, like, and I feel foolish about it, like whether he was gonna wake up or whether it was ever gonna play a role, which. Hindsight, kind of silly, because why would they have him linger, and get a little bit of the backstory if there wasn't going to be a little drama around it. And so getting past that, him waking up, and I guess it still kind of surprised me. Like, he survived a plane crash, can't probably have this feeling that, I'm out of the woods, and he is so bent on letting Jack know that Kate is a terrible person, or has this background, right? Yeah. And thinking about the title and clean slate, And here he is, like we're moments into the episode, he's already crapping all over the idea of a clean slate. Like he can't wait to put the dirt on Kate, and like I say, he's probably not even going to make it, but he's going to ruin her existence on this island. Or
well,
it's kind of shock. I don't know. It just kind of hit me weird.
Well, to be fair, and I'm sure I feel like you'd agree with this as somebody that's worked in law enforcement, like. From his position, like I mean, without us knowing what she's done at this point,
right.
And how serious that is, like, let's assume the worst, and she's done something as bad as murder.
She's murdered an entire group of survivors after a plane crash.
Yeah. If she's done something along the lines of killing somebody, he probably feels morally obligated to be like, hey, don't trust her, she's dangerous. So yeah, that's me playing devil's advocate to what you're saying there. He's not the person in his position, in his role in society, that's going to be like, oh, you can start over. Like, just...
right. However, the cynical side of me felt it was deeper than that, right?
No, without a doubt.
Like, let's do his ender or something, right?
I'm glad you said that. Real quick before I get into that. Because you're saying you felt like it goes deeper, and the part where I definitely feel that is like when he's asking Jack to like talk to her alone for the Marshal wants to talk to her alone. He's asking Jack for that, and Jack's like kind of hesitant, and he's like, "Oh, she got to you too, didn't she?" And it's like it does feel like he's like trying to fucking undermine her in like this, I don't know, kind of petty way.
Like I don't, she's a criminal. She's no good for anybody but me.
Well, that's what's funny.
It's the vibe I got.
It's funny because it's like I don't want to keep bringing this up every episode, but I didn't see these early episodes until I had already become familiar with the show. So a lot of these things, like when I first saw these early episodes, I already knew a lot. So I never, like, I already kind of had a sense of the relationship that the Marshal had with Kate, and I never like picked up on like that possible interpretation that he at one point had some kind of weird romantic feelings for her, like in his pursuit of her or something. But like after you said that when we filmed the pilot, watching this episode, I was totally like seeing it. I was like, oh yeah, it does kind of feel like that's what they were maybe hinting at. And then when he says, "Oh, she got to you too," like, I feel like
that's what it alludes to, right?
That's what I feel like if I had watched it in chronological order, that's how I would have read that scene.
I think the other thing that again, don't hate me for this, but it's like I've come out of a 20-year coma because I've come to that conclusion, and I don't recall coming to that conclusion the first time. I'm telling you, that's the conclusion I came to in watching this episode again, and I can't, I probably came to the same conclusion, but it's so weird with this time lapse how. It literally makes me feel like I have some weird amnesia, but I literally feel like I am getting to rediscover Lost as if I've never watched it, and I've got just enough information to be dangerous. I mean, it's been pretty interesting.
Yeah. Well, so talking about the Marshal and talking about philosophical concepts like Tabula Rasa, what I really like about this show, and I feel like this is the first episode that really starts to show that this is something that the series wants to explore a lot. They kind of confront the characters and then us, the audience, watching them grapple with it. They confront us with philosophical quandaries, such as whether or not to kill the Marshal. Like, that's kind of the whole thing that Jack's wrestling with the whole episode. And the other thing, we'll talk about both of these, but at the beginning of the episode, when the group coming back from hearing the French transmission, they were trying to get to broadcast from the transceiver, but they can't because this transmission's going. And not only that, if that transmission's been going for 16 years and hasn't been heard, then even if they got rid of that transmission, why would anybody hear theirs?
Right.
Anyways, they decide on the way back, let's say, like Saeed says, like, we're not going to tell anybody. And he kind of goes into why he doesn't think it would be a good idea, and that kind of convinces everybody to be on the same page. And we're not going to tell everybody what we heard. So those are two philosophical things. I guess we can talk about the Marshal one first, since it's the first one.
Yeah. So here's the thing that got me about the Marshal one, because it's a couple things wrapped up. Jack has medical experience. He knows that this dude's not going to survive, right? So that's the easy way out. Morally, you just go like, well, he's gonna die anyway, right? Now, it'd be different if he was laying around begging you not to kill him. You're like, nah, you're gonna die anyway. We're just gonna end it now. But there's that piece. But then when you add in the history he learns, with the Marshal and Kate, then even if it was the righteous thing to do, it immediately starts to turn into something that feels dirty. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna murder him for Kate. Like, would Kate want that? He's acting like Kate would want that.
That's funny because I never even thought about like that level of it. There's so many levels of it that I have thought about, and I never even thought about the fact that probably on some level he's like, well, I like Kate, and this guy is a threat to that, and if I kill it, like maybe on some, like he's worried that on some level he'd be doing
on some level he's doing it bad. When really, if he just sticks with what he knows medically, it could be seen as, there's a history of that. People not wanting to linger and asking people they care about to do things. And I think the show did a really good job of then, you know the history. Well, if you know the history, it's gonna leave the viewer to decide whether Jack did it out of righteousness or out of some loyalty to what this relationship might become with Kate.
Well, because you say like leaves it open to. I don't know if I might have misunderstood what you're saying, but like Jack only does it like once Sawyer has shot him and then failed to do it, and then that's when Jack actually follows through and shows, which I love because Sawyer's saying, like, when Sawyer shoots him and he walks out of the tent, like Jack's like, "What did you do?" He's like, "What you couldn't." And then shortly after that, Jack shows like, "Oh, I could."
Yeah.
But no, that's not really what the issue was. So all that's to say, I don't think that there's any question that Jack only did it to put him out of his misery, because he waited until that point to do it.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I was thinking more of the lead up to that. Like, what's he going to do and how is it going to be seen, more than, it did reveal itself to, like, exactly what you said. So, and to your point, piggybacking on what you said, it gives you this lead up to where he's going to make this decision where you can second guess him. He avoids that only to get put in that position again and prove, like you said, that he can absolutely take care of business if that's the right thing to do. It was just it was just a well-played roller coaster to kind of go on, where maybe your opinion of Jack is hanging in the balance. Like, well, what's he going to do? What would I do? It throws those things into your psyche.
Yeah.
I thought it was very well done.
Yeah. I like I say debate. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but the interaction that Jack and Sawyer have inside the fuselage. And I mean, that fucking line that Sawyer's like, how many of those pills are you going to use to fix him? The implication in just that part is like, hey, we might need those for everybody else. Or at least, I don't know if that's what he was implying, but that's something to think about. And Jack's like, as many as it takes. And then Sawyer's response is, yeah, well, how many you got? Like,
yeah,
do you have as many as it would take?
Yeah.
And therefore, like, is it going to be completely pointless to use all this medicine on a guy that's going to die anyways? And then obviously, the suffering is the other aspect of it. Like, you hear him scream, the whole camp hears him screaming, and it's an interesting ethical question.
Well,
the right thing to do is.
And then you bring up another part, right? And so it kind of segues into the decision not to talk about the transmission. But before I get to that, the camp hearing him scream, the camp hearing him suffer, you're already in this fragile mental state. People are starting to wrestle with the reality. Okay, so we survived, but for how long? Like, things are like really starting to roll. And now something, I don't want to call it simple, but something as simple as this dude's suffering and people having to psychologically deal with that, well, that could break the rest of your existence. I mean, you could literally break people in your space that otherwise might be a valuable asset in whatever the rest of this thing looks like to rescue. And now you broke them mentally, and they lose their will to live, or they start doing things drastic that humans might do if they don't want to suffer like that, and they can see that being their future. So yeah, that even in that piece, ending the Marshal's life would have probably been the righteous thing to do, just on that alone. Which, segueing into the transmission and not talking, same concept. I think it's coming from the same spot. Like, okay, so we go back and we tell them that. And now we immediately kill their belief that there's a chance for rescue. Well, what does that look like when you're on an island with people who survived a plane crash and what, you're a handful of episodes in or whatever, few sunrises in, and you're like, oh, by the way, the last people, they didn't make it. So nobody's heard from them. You gotta set yourself up for failure before we get to the next episode. So
yeah, it's interesting because it's like, do the rest of the people, do they deserve the truth? It's like, I feel like, for me, just speaking for myself, I feel like on an individual basis, yes. But that's it kind of is a different thing when it's a whole group. And
now you're gonna open it up because that just makes it real, which in my humble opinion, when you look at that and then you plug it into everything that you've learned about life and all the arguments for keeping, intel or certain, life-altering information, whether it's the government or your parents or what, like people keeping things from you your whole life, and they're making the decision that psychologically or spiritually you can't handle the truth, right? Like I'm doing this to protect you. And then, like you said, from an individual basis, the argument is, especially once your brain's fully developed, is like, I'll decide what I can handle. I'll decide what I do with that information, whether my belief system can be shaken by this thing that I didn't know about or that you're going to reveal to me. And so there's always this, I guess this balance between, am I being righteous or self-righteous when I decide who can handle what when it comes to truth and evidence and information.
Yeah. Well, because that was going to be my next question is like, I don't necessarily disagree with their decision to give it, but it raises another question that I feel they should grapple with, which is what gives them the right to dictate, that
famous who died and left you God.
Again, this is just the first episode outside of the pilot, and we're already getting into these really interesting philosophical ideas and debates, and like a lot of these things. These are the types of questions. Lost has a reputation for being a show that raises questions with no answers, and I disagree with the way that reputation is framed. But the irony is, it does bring up philosophical questions, which do not have a right or wrong answer. Yes. So in that way, it kind of does raise questions without answers.
But back to your point, for the people who say that and you say they answer a lot of questions, well,
they answer the questions that they're talking about. Right. When they say that.
Well, but in addition, they give you an opportunity to answer your own questions.
Right.
Which I think is the also just one of the fascinating things about the way the show is put together. It's like, if you're going to give me all these philosophical things to look at, I can sit there and be that person that says, well, you didn't tell me the answer. Well, the idea was for you to figure out the answer. Exactly. Right. And so answer, if I want to be, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally lazy about it, well, then I could watch Lost and have nothing but questions and talk to my, friend who's less intellectual than me and will never come up with an answer. But it gives you an opportunity to look internally and figure out the answer for yourself. Yeah. And like you say, even if you and I came to the different conclusions, we're going to come to our truth. We're going to come to our answer based off of our experiences, prejudices, and things that we've had happen in life.
Or you don't even necessarily have to do that in every case. Right. I think the idea is that the show is confronting you with these things. It's making you consider them, and then like it's okay if you don't have like a. I feel like that's the case for me a lot of times. I don't have this is definitely what I think is right. Like I think. It's infinitely more nuanced and unique to each situation and everything. But the idea is to think and consider these things and consider perspectives and ideas. And
I'm just going to keep jumping off what you say, because I think it also speaks highly about empathy and even sympathy. But I like the empathy side as well. Is that even if I don't want to come to a conclusion for myself, it does force me to consider how someone else might feel about that as well. Yeah. So it's just, man, I feel like this could just keep rolling into more and more and more, because there's so much in such a little piece of what this episode was about, yet they titled it that way, so it's all about that.
Well, so talking about their decision to lie and everything, that brings me to what I think will be a semi-recurring segment of this podcast, where I ever so occasionally will show you a deleted scene from the show. So deleted scenes, in the case of Lost, and I think in the case of most shows that I've watched, they're usually deleted for a good reason. Like, it didn't add anything of particular value. It kind of over explained something, or they found like a better, more subtle way to actually execute it in the episode as it now exists. But because Lost was a network television show, and especially back then, it had to fit an exact time frame because of the commercials. Like, starts at 7, it has to be over by 8, but it also has to have this amount of ad time in there. So because of that, there were sometimes things that had to be cut out for the sake of time. And there are a handful of examples throughout the series of deleted scenes where I'm like, God, I wish that had been kept in. And this episode is the first example of that. So real quick, I'm going to show you that deleted scene. It's just a minute long.
Live reaction. Stand by.
Then we talk about it.
Thought it was called a bluff.
Bluffing, lying, it's all the same in poker.
Can you teach me?
Sure. You want to be a good poker player, you need to be able to spot a liar. And the only way to spot a liar is to find their tell. The easiest tell is one that someone makes with their body. They tense up, make a fist, curl their toes. Another amateur mistake. Some people get very defensive when they're lying, and even hostile. More experienced players use distractions to keep your attention off their cards. Others avoid contact altogether. They isolate themselves for fear of being unable to hide the truth. And then some people, you just can't read it all.
Like, that's pretty good, right?
Yeah, that's real good, John Locke.
So yeah, there's so many things I like about that, and so many reasons that I think that it should have been kept in. First of all, well, I mean, this isn't like the most prominent thing. In fact, I think I just thought of this as we watched it that time. But like him talking about not being able to read Kate kind of fits the clean slate, like in a different way.
Right.
Fits the clean slate theme of the episode, I guess. But did you understand? It's funny because like the first few times that I saw that deleted scene, in my teenage years when I first had the DVD set, went completely over my head that he's pointing out the people that heard the transmission and the people that are currently hiding something. It's so it shows that Locke is picking up that there is something that they're covering up.
Yes.
There's something that they're hiding. So that's one reason I think it should have been kept in. It also further establishes that Walt and him are forming a relationship, and it adds context to the scene that is still in the episode where Michael's asking Walt who he was hanging out with, and then it also adds the context of like Walt knows that Michael's lying when he says, "I haven't given up on your dog." And I'm gonna find your dog. Remember, Walt was like, "No, you're lying." It's like, yeah, it's because Locke taught him how to spot
a lie.
Yeah. So yeah, for all those reasons, like I'm like, God, I wish that was still in the episode.
Yes.
It's such a good scene. And he's like making the whistle. Like he's starting to make the whistle.
Right.
Yeah.
I tell you, and again, if you took everything you just said out of it, if you took everything you just said out of it, and you thought about tells in poker, or just tells when you've through experience just felt like somebody was full of it, they're lying to you. What a cool scene to have them doing otherwise innocuous things that they could be doing as survivors of this plane crash. It fits and it doesn't fit. But here he is trying to teach Walt this, and everybody is presenting something that fits for a tell. So he's able to address it. And the funny thing about it is they didn't have to manufacture that, because all of those things have happened already. They've already happened in the pilots. They were just individual. They weren't put into context for you like that, right? And then when you add what you said to it, that these are also the people who know this secret that they've chosen to righteously or self-righteously withhold from the rest of the survivors, it just puts a whole other spin on, I think what I take from it or took from it both is kind of that spiritual nature of Locke that's already kind of being laid out too, right? He's already on this journey that nobody else is on. He already feels like he's experienced miracles, and now he's almost, showing Walt this Messiah-like quality where he can just look at people and be like, liar. And so it's just
I like the way you did that.
Yeah, it's
liar.
Yeah, it's just it's quite the trip. So yeah. And then there's also just that trust in mature leadership, bringing up a young mind. There's also that conundrum. It's not the person who should be teaching him these things. It's this crazy orange smile guy.
Yeah, which, I mean, that, jumping ahead to the end of the episode, we talked in the pilot about how, like, that was kind of Locke's deal in the pilot, is just, what the fuck's going on with this guy? Like, it is literally just a mysterious dude who could literally have all kinds of things going on with him. And then in this episode, like, he seems pretty innocuously helping and stuff. But then at the end, like, the fucking creepy way to end it, like him just watching and then the music over it, like, definitely leaves you like, what the fuck is this guy's deal? Which, may lead into the next episode. But okay, so going back all the way to the beginning of the episode from the end, a couple of things that I wanted to point out. The dinosaur mention that I mentioned when we were talking about the pilot, that Hurley at one point was like, oh, maybe it's a dinosaur. And I was like, okay, it's not a dinosaur, because Hurley literally fucking threw that out there. You'd be dumb to then be like, oh, yep, it was a dinosaur.
If that was supposed to make Hurley seem stupid, then I was like, I'm with Hurley. Like, it could have been a dinosaur at that point for me. But what?
Well, I mean, what else could be knocking down the trees that would be any less ridiculous?
Right, yeah. Like, it's definitely something large that can run through trees. So
that the larger world's not aware of, presumably.
Right. It was so. But then for Hurley, there's this character build piece where it's like he's almost. It shows the bit of like almost like the childlike innocence that he still has. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that. I think that's the part that kind of spoke to me. It's like, oh, they're gonna go ahead and set the tone for that now. So, I liked it. But.
Well, that reminds me of the scene. This episode, probably my favorite as far as like the funny scenes. The scene I find the funniest is Hurley, like, trying to get the water. I think that's what he was doing. And, like, Kate's there, and he knows that she's the fugitive, and he's, like, all nervous. And then she turns around, and he sees the gun in her pants.
Yeah.
And he's, like, just like, I gotta go. It's so funny. It gets me every time.
So, again, going back to Kate and going back to the flashbacks, which I'm already digging, and I know I loved when I originally saw them, but I think the flashback of starting to learn already, well, how bad is Kate? Like, what's the Marshal trying to protect people from,
right.
Yeah. And so, going back to the idea that here she is on the lam, no pun intended, and she's found in this.
What's the pun?
That's what I was going to say.
Sorry.
She's found in the farmer's sheep pen.
Oh.
And
sorry, I ruined it.
No, that's okay. and so here you go. Once again, you got Kate winning people over at first sight, so to speak, right? Mm. This guy finds this person hiding amongst his livestock, and whether or not he thought she was up to no good immediately or not, he had no qualms about taking her in and giving her quarters, if you will, and making a deal with her to kind of work the land, so to speak, and he would take care of her. So you learn that, like, okay, so she's likable, at the scene of this plane crash immediately for some people. She's likable even when she's on the lam, and this guy takes her in. To see that relationship, and then here she is trying to sneak away from, this guy. Like, I'm doing her a favor, and this is how she repays me. She's trying to get out of here. And not like he was going to hold her against her will.
Sure.
But then I wonder, did that play into his thought process? Like, I was trying to help you, but if you don't want my help, I'll help myself.
It's funny because I've literally thought the same thing. I don't remember if I thought it when I first saw the episode. I don't remember if I thought it then for sure, but I know for the longest time I've always kind of thought that, like, he clearly had already seen, like, that night when she's trying to sneak out, he'd clearly already seen that she was wanted and saw the reward. But my question is, like yeah, was he going to reach the decision to turn her in before he saw she was about to leave? Like, did that kind of be like, okay, well she's going to leave, I'm not going to have her here anymore, I like having her here, so she's not going to be here anyways, and I really need the money? They kind of like push him into making that decision, whereas otherwise he might have thought about it a little longer and maybe not made it.
Which goes back to the philosophical thing again, because it's like it's a means to an end, right? And so is he her savior, or is he just selfish? Right? Yeah. And because he is fine helping her out, and maybe that's not a guy. Oh, I'm a good person, even if she's done something wrong. I'm going to give her a second chance. All that stuff, up until the point that he's going to lose this companionship that he was blessed with. Yeah. And then he's like, oh well, if I'm losing that anyway, I tell you what I am going to get.
Yeah. Like if you really cared about her, then her leaving would have no bearing on whether or not.
I love you enough to let you go theory, right? Yeah. I love you enough to give money for you.
So last week when we talked about the pilot, you talked about, like, Kate not seeming trusting to you, and I kind of was just like, well, it's funny because in some ways, especially in the future when we get more context, I feel like she's, like, abnormally trusting of Jack specifically, and that's, now that you've seen this episode, and you'll get more of this as time goes on, but, like, you see that she gives this guy a fake name. She says her name's Annie. She doesn't tell him her name. Yeah. She doesn't feel like she can stick around. I mean, there's probably other reasons that she doesn't want to stay in one spot and whatever. But versus she meets Jack, and when Jack asks her name, like, she tells him her real name. I don't know if they've established. I don't remember if the Marshal calls her Kate in this episode. I think he does, but let's assume that he does. Yeah. and that confirms to us that she gave Jack her real name. Something that she, obviously, we now know she didn't do with this guy, and maybe eventually we'll learn if that's a rare thing for her or not. But the point is, she trusted Jack in that way. And then in this episode, you know, she agrees to lie to everybody else, not tell them about the French transmission, but she pulls Jack aside and says, I wanted to tell you about this thing that we heard. Of course, the irony is Jack's, like, looking for her to trust him with something else. And he's like, oh, is that it? And she's like, yeah. And she's not quite ready at that point to tell him that she's a fugitive or what she did. Although by the end of the episode, she does want to tell him that. And, you know, that might be a unique thing for her. But Jack tells her, like, you know, I don't want to know. And the clean slate thing. But yeah, sorry.
I think what's funny about that is like the people who don't want to think about it to the level in which you're thinking about it, they're gonna argue, or I think the argument's there. It's like, well, yeah, she has nothing to lose now, right? Marshall's probably gonna die. Clearly doesn't have a federal jail cell to put her in, and they're on this island. But again, getting a little deeper into that, she has no idea. There could already be rescue, craft coming their way. Like, she doesn't know. Yeah. She could go and decide to be, honest, and then 48, 72 hours she's picked back up. They're going through the manifest, and they're gonna find out she's the fugitive that was with the Marshal anyway, right? So. Yeah. I think, like I say, if you wanted to be lazy intellectually, you could just say, well,
not even lazy, because I think you make a good point that, like, something that you could argue against what I'm saying, especially watching it the first time through, is like, we don't actually know that she was going to tell him the truth. Like, he now knows she's the fugitive. She's saying she wants to tell him what she did. Probably know it could be some story that she spins to be like, oh, I got falsely accused of doing this. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I think you're right that an argument could be made that, like, okay, I'm jumping to a conclusion that, like, oh, she was willing to trust him by this point, and that's a sign of something. But so yeah, I guess we could kind of take that away. But the name thing I do think is significant. It does show she feels something towards Jack that is rare for Kate. Yes. There's something about him that she trusts. So I only have a couple more random tidbits that I kind of wanted to bring up. Is there anything else that you had?
No.
Okay. So going back to the beginning of the episode again, Boone taking the gun, I wanted to bring up, or trying to take the gun, because we did briefly talk about him in pilot part 1, I think, about like how he's trying to do the CPR and Jack like dismisses him, and then like later he's like, oh, did the guy with the leg, is he all right? And Jack's like, yeah, I said it, he's fine. And Boone's like, okay, good job. Like he's kind of like, he wants to be. It seems to me that he like wants to be seen as that type of leader or useful, or however you want to.
Bare minimum, the Robin to his Batman to Jack. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's going into this episode, like that being like the first like action that he takes, like he wants to protect. I mean, if you take him at face value, let's say, they're obviously suspicious of why he's trying to take the gun, but like, if you take it at face value, that he wants to protect them, that he wants to feel like he is a protector. Just something interesting that I thought was worth noting, especially going forward.
I agree. I think it builds on that suspicion that we had to begin with, with the pilot episodes, and it's interesting because I don't remember how that turns out. I don't remember how that continues
how
to maybe gets fed or doesn't.
Yeah, right. And the only other thing, and I probably could have said this when we were talking about the flashbacks or Kate as a person, but we talked in the pilot about her saving the Marshal by putting the oxygen mask on him, and we talked about how like, okay, so even if she's done something horrible, like even if she is guilty of whatever she was arrested for, like it shows that, okay, well, it's not as cut and dry as like she's a murderer, she's evil, she needs to be, there's more nuance there. Like,
yes,
no one's clear cut evil.
To that point, it makes me wonder, like when I think about Ray. And she saves Ray, and then I'm coming to the conclusion. Well, even though she might be mad at him, like how dare you? You're trying to turn me in for reward money. Like I didn't mean anything to you, or which is kind of a weird thing to say when you were just found trespassing on someone's property and they fed you and gave you a job. But if that's her thought process, there's this thought process of like, well, he still did this for me. I'm not going to just let him die. Whether it's a moral thing or no, I'm not going to repay, bad for bad. So then when I think about the Marshal, it kind of fed into my, there's something deeper there, because it's like, well, what did he do that was worth saving? I mean, he's the guy that's taking her freedom away. And arguably, if that's a real world scenario as we know it, it's not the movies and whatnot. There's not much of a relationship there of like, oh, we were friends. Sorry, I had to arrest you for that felony. So I found it kind of interesting. That made me wonder, like, oh, are we on the right track? Does this guy, did he have more feelings for Kate than just a Marshal taking a fugitive into custody type thing?
Yeah. Well, so I mean, backing up to Ray, like I don't even feel like him betraying her or him taking care of her for those months. I don't even necessarily think that has to have played into her decision to save him. I mean, it could just be simply that she felt it would be wrong to let him die.
Weird, but definitely could have been so much simpler. But again, to that point, I think that's because again, you always get deeper in this stuff than me, and we discussed
I mean, so far it doesn't. It seems like you're getting pretty.
Well, but what's funny about it is like I feel like I feel like Lost is pulling that out of me, where I'm perfectly capable and a lot of times happy with just taking things at face value when it comes to shows or movies. I'm not one of those guys that's always looking to dig deeper. And this because when we first watched it, although I can't recall all the conversations, I was always like, hey, what did you think about this? And then you were giving me this information. Well, now I'm old. There's no shot that I remember you giving me that information. But the show does make you not want to get lazy about your thought process and your philosophies and your, like I say, your prejudices, your experiences, and all that stuff. So
it rewards thinking deeper. I mean, in my opinion, anyway. Like I've never really understood why people with good stories like this, anyways, like why you wouldn't want to like dig, like once you kind of do it at first and you kind of realize like, oh, like I don't know, I guess I got addicted to that. That's kind of why I became like obsessed with storytelling the way that I am now. I mean, it's like my passion, and that it is because like I got addicted to that feeling of like, oh, suddenly I thought about this in a different way, and there's this whole other chain of thought that it's unlocked, and yeah, to this day, like that is what I fucking crave. Well, so I think that we've covered everything that we each wanted to talk about, which brings us to our next segment, which is the fan mail. We're still waiting on like a lot of those to come in. I think it would help if I post for you guys, at least on the video version, what our planned filming schedule is, because we are filming these a bit in advance of when they will actually be released. Yeah, I can kind of show you, okay, we're going to film this episode on this date, and then you guys can know, like, if you have something specific to say about a specific episode, like, try and get it in by then. If you don't, it's not a big deal. Like, if you have something you want to say about an episode we've already talked about, or I mean, hell, if we say something in a podcast episode that you want to respond to, absolutely do that, and I'm certain that we can talk about it in another podcast episode. But yeah, so I'll put up the schedule on the screen if you're watching the video. The planned, so those will be like the earliest that we film those episodes. I have received a couple of emails. One of them was a bit spoilery for the series, so I don't really want us to address that, the both of us. The other one is about an episode that we're still a little bit away from, so we're not going to address that yet. So we don't really have a specific email for today's podcast episode, but you remember Ben Ward from last week? We addressed his email in both Pilot Part 1 and Pilot Part 2.
Yes.
As of yesterday, from when we're filming this, Pilot Part 1 of the podcast was released, and this morning Ben commented on it, and he actually had a bit that he added that he said he forgot to mention in the email. So I thought we could talk about that in the fan mail section.
I like it.
So yeah.
Big fan of Ben.
Awesome. Me too, by the way. I realized as I was listening that I forgot one other thing that I always do when getting people into the show. I'll often lend out my box set. I recommend they watch one episode a day at most, and maybe a week between seasons, as the show was structured and designed around the audience having to wait for the next one. I'll also recommend that they resist looking stuff up online. Well, so first of all, he says he lends out his box set. I don't do that, mainly, I mean, for a few reasons, but the main issue these days is that I only have the Blu-ray complete series box set, and the artwork for each season and for the box set as a whole is kind of spoilery. Like, it literally shows stuff from like future things. So I don't want them to like see that when they're, trying to get out the next disc. That was less of a problem back when I used to also have the individual DVD box sets, because those weren't as spoilery in their artwork, and if they were, at least it was kind of restricted to that season. What happened to my DVD box sets, though, is that I've moved around a bit, and at some point when I moved back up to where I am now, I had to try and UPS some stuff I had in storage down in Georgia. I tried to UPS a big box of like sentimental things, and some things that were more valuable than others. But in that box was all 6 seasons of my lost DVDs.
Oh wow!
And fucking UPS delivered it to the wrong address. Was never able to get it back. Anyways, back to the point. I don't tend to lend my box set out. But I mean that's the thing too, though. Like, most of the people that I've gotten into the show, I have watched it with them, or at least most of the episodes with them. Because I also don't trust the streaming sites.
I think the other thing that gets me about what Ben said is I think it once again shows the true fan in Ben of the show, because you talked about it. If we didn't talk about it in the first episode, we've talked about having to wait for the next episode, and there is something about that. And the way that we're doing this, I'm not sitting around binge watching this so then we can talk about it. I'm doing it just like I would have done it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And we're discussing it off of that. And I think if we didn't do it that way, it would be a lot less for me. You could still make it interesting. I don't think I'd be able to make it as interesting from my viewpoint if I was studied ahead and wasn't experiencing it the way it was meant to be experienced.
Well, it's interesting because I had a counter argument. I don't know. I don't know if counter argument's the right word, but like it's funny because I'm somewhere in the middle. Like the reason that Lost, we talked about this in the pilot. The reason that Lost has the reputation it has is partly, or in a large part, because of how it aired, which was like it was to the fans at the time, or at least to a lot of the fans at the time, myself included at points. It was excruciatingly spread out. Like the 23 episode season of like season 3, for example, like over 8 months, you get 23 episodes spread out that long. And you know, a lot of people don't have the patience for that.
A lot of people didn't grow up watching Dallas, trying to figure out who shot JR.
But so I think there is a valid, I don't know if complaint is the word I'm looking for, but or even criticism. But like, I think it's valid for people to not enjoy that, or to be able to be as engaged with it across that span, you know, at that rate. I think a reason that Lost has kind of gotten a better reputation among people that have discovered it since it ended, that have discovered it through streaming services. The reason that it's getting a bit of a better reception within that group is because they're able to binge it. So that said, I'm between those two extremes. Yes. I do think that watching it, like just binging it, you are losing something without a doubt. But I do think that the exact way that it aired was a bit excruciating at times, and unnecessarily so. They were kind of a slave to the format that it was made for, and in some ways, like that was to the show's benefit. Like it was constrained to that format, and it had to adhere to that. And in a lot of ways, the show is what it is because of that, and that's a great thing. Yeah. But yeah, I think that there are some ways in which that was a detriment. So when I've gotten the people to watch it with me, the way that I have done it in recent years, I have a very specific way that I break it up. So we would try and do it weekly, like once a week, but we would do 3 to 4 episodes each week. And I would I have a very specific way that I broke it up to preserve what are, in my opinion, the best cliffhangers, like the ones that I remember. Oh my god! Like all week long, being like, "What's going to happen with this?" Like those are the ones where I would leave them at, and leave them with a week of wondering, you know, what's going to happen next. Because yeah, that would kind of combines both aspects. Because talking from my personal experience of the frustrating side of the week thing, like I remember a specific thing in season 3. I won't get into specifics of it, but there's an episode in the middle of season 3 that ends on a huge cliffhanger, and I'm like one of my favorite ones. Like just be like, oh my god, I can't wait to find out what's going to happen next. They don't get back to that plot point until, so that was like the 13th episode. They don't get back to that plot point until the 19th episode. Yeah, the 19th episode. So that's 6 fucking weeks of real-time wait that I had to wait for. And don't get me wrong, every episode in between there was fucking phenomenal. But like I was constantly just like, oh my god, like are they ever gonna get back to this? Whereas watching it the way that I've broken up before, like you end with that cliffhanger the 1 week at the 13th episode. You have 1 week of another 3 episodes where you don't get back to that plot point, and so it's like, oh, you still keep them waiting. But then the next week, when you get to the next set, you're back to it. It's not as insane. It's a 2 week wait to get back to that plot point versus 6 weeks. So I do kind of like watching more than one episode at once. Yeah. I do think that kind of creates a deeper immersion, or it can, at least for at least some people.
Well, I'll hit you with a little bit more philosophy on that, or thought process on that, because again, you were in that sweet spot where you experienced what I experienced for most of my life, where you had to wait for that payoff. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, you were still young when you could start getting box sets and you could start, I don't know that they used the term all the way back when that, but binge watching things, right? Yeah. Like I think now, And so if you contextually, if you grew up and all you ever had to do was just find a show that you like and watch it, watch the whole time. I mean, Netflix does it sometimes now, where they'll put so many episodes out at a time, and you have to wait, or you can just wait till they're all there and binge watch them, right?
Yeah.
And so it's that instant gratification that we talk about, and it almost numbs. It almost numbs some of those things in you that make you appreciate things over time. And it's society as a whole. Convenience, again, I won't get all deep into it, but I think that's the piece that it's really hard for people today who have never known that delayed gratification to put themselves through that. It's like, why would I do that?
Or to have because like that's another part of what Ben says that I do agree with is that there is, if you're just watching episode after episode after episode and you're not taking the time to think or like theorize. I mean, theorizing about this show specifically was such a huge part of the experience. And if you're like not even giving yourself time to think about what might be going on, then you're losing a whole element of the experience.
Or your point, you don't take time to be philosophical about it, and so you're just taking it all in, and then that's how you end up going. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of stuff unanswered. Well, because you didn't answer it, like you didn't take the time to answer it, so it's gonna be left unanswered. Yeah.
Well, and so to be fair, I'm not even necessarily disagreeing with Ben, because I mean, really, if he's saying one episode a day, that's actually in the long run a quicker rate than just 3 or 4 episodes a week. So it's really just kind of a different way of doing it. The irony of me saying all that is that this podcast is kind of encouraging people to watch it the way that it aired. But but there are reasons for that. Probably the largest one being it's just impossible for me for us to film and edit fucking that many episodes that quickly and that consecutively. I think that's all I had to say about that part of that. So he also says that he tells them to resist the urge to look stuff online. Yeah, without a doubt, and which kind of ties into the very beginning of this podcast episode. I know it's a bit different with you because you have technically seen it before, and there are things that you do know and remember. But yeah, I mean, yeah. So with new viewers specifically, like there are reveals in this show that like I remember experiencing so clearly, and that I think I'll remember for the rest of my life, like just like what I felt in that moment of having this thing revealed, and for somebody to risk losing that by I'm just gonna look this thing up online, and then it's like, oh, I accidentally read this. That makes me so nervous. Like if I'm watching with somebody and they're like, "Oh, I looked up this actor," and I'm like, don't do that. Like, wait till you're done. So yeah, I think that's everything I had to say about that. So once again, if you guys want to write into the show, literally anything that you want to say about the podcast or Lost, send it in either in written form, or you can send in an audio message or a video message, and we will almost certainly get it onto the show. I mean, unless we start getting so much that it's like, too much, but I don't really see that happening. Send that in however you want to send it in, but the email address is dr.candlepun@gmail.com, or, and I keep forgetting to say this, if you are watching this on YouTube, like you're actually watching the video version, you can actually just comment on the video the way Ben did with Pilot Part 1. Like what we just read was a comment on that video. So we can absolutely do that too if you don't want to send in the email. We would love to hear from you guys. Again, that's to me a critical part of what makes Lost amazing, is the discussion about it. And, I think talking about you is already like so much better than just me talking about the show by myself. If we can get other people involved in these conversations, then I think that'll just increase it exponentially. But yeah, I think that's everything we have for this one. Next week, we'll be doing episode 4, Walkabout, which I know you remember at least more about, but it's an exciting one. Definitely excited to talk about it.
Hope to see you guys then.
I would now like to give a special thank you to the currently active donors. These include candidate number 90, Ben Ward, Candidate number 108, Jeffrey Winslow. Candidate number 69, Brian Phillips. Candidate number 32, Chuck Boyd. And candidate number 341, Hans. If you too would like to become a candidate, you can do so for as little as $1. One-time or recurring donations can be set up on Ko-fi.com/Candlepun or Patreon.com/Candlepun. A donation of any amount will get you credited in this podcast and added to the candidate wall, which will be displayed in all video versions of the episodes of this podcast from that point forward, even once you're no longer donating. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the multiple people that have donated equipment and resources that are used in the production of this podcast. These include Mary Mullins, Brandon Huth, Charles Huth, William McMahon, and Charlene McMahon. Until next time, namaste and good luck.
Damn, have fun with that edit.
It'll be fun. To like this video, click the thumbs up. Or, if there has been an incursion by the hostiles, click the thumbs down. To leave feedback, enter a comment below. To be notified when more videos arrive, click the circle and then select the notification bell. To view previous content from this channel, click either of the two boxes.